Okay. Lloyd is with us. Please welcome Lloyd. He's going to talk to us about waveform viewing in VScode. Thanks, Lloyd. Cheers.
Great. All right, so I'm going to be talking about Vaporview, which is a VScode extension that I created. So it's a waveform viewer, and I couldn't pass up this opportunity for a visual pun, so took this yesterday at the beach. So how it all began, so for those of you that know anything about the VScode API, it's in TypeScript, and so you may be thinking, like, why would you want to write a waveform viewer in TypeScript and JavaScript? And that's a great question. So my life choices that got me to this point. So previously, I worked for Chronic Semiconductor, and they're an FPGA company. They make high-performance FPGAs that compete with Altera and Xilinx. And for reasons that are out of the scope of this presentation, I was tasked with debugging this soft logic MCU, and I had to use a waveform dump to do it. So we had like this kind of logic analyzer soft IP that we were using. It had no ETM tracing or like GDB or anything like that, like things that normal people would use to try to debug it. So what I had is, the way that I was doing it is I had like an object dump file in VS Code in one window, and then I had a waveform viewer in another window, and that was running in a VNC. And by the way, like, for those of you that I've talked to, you've probably heard me give this rant before, but I'm going to waste a little bit of my time to say, like, what the heck is up with the industry's obsession with VNCs and VDIs? Because, like, I just can't stand it. Like, I like my software to run at, like, a proper, at least 30 frames a second, and I like my text to render properly. I like copy paste to work, and VNC like jankifies all of that. So anyways, so for those of you who are doing open source stuff, like, please try to get the industry off of VNC and VDI and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, so I'm doing this, and I thought, oh, there's got to be a better way of doing this. Surely there is a VS Code extension that's like a waveform viewer. So turns out there was, and it was Wavetrace VCD. And it was $15 if you wanted to view more than 8 signals. I was hoping for a collective boo for that, boo for the closed source nature. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah. So, and I was like, okay, these guys, they need to be put out of business. Like, how cool would it be to like own and maintain my own VS Code extension? I didn't really know TypeScript. I did know JavaScript, and I did know how to make WebView, like web UIs. I kind of made like a more janky version of what Alex made, and so I had some experience doing that. And I thought, okay, maybe I could do a waveform viewer. It would be really cool. Also, just to put these guys out of business and show them, like, you know, don't go charging money for VS Code extensions. I've literally never seen any other VS Code extension that cost money. Anyways, so on brand for hardware EDA tools. So then I came up with this idea. So the logo, if you see, it's like the letter V. It was a ridgeline plot. I just thought it was really cool because I thought it's named Vaporview because it was kind of like vaporware. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to do this. But anyway, so why VS Code? And that's actually a question that I got from a lot of my coworkers. Like, why would you want to do this sort of thing? Like, why would you want to put it in VS Code? And so it's the most popular text editor in IDE besides like Vim and Emacs. It supports a thin client server and a standalone application model. And so I thought it'd be really cool to be able to, like, you know, use VS Code as a thin client. Now, I understand that it's not the thinnest of clients. Like, it's built on Electron, which, for being named after one of the lightest subatomic particles, it's resource heavy. They should call it Top Quark. I'm glad this quantum physics jokes land on you guys. Yeah, so, but anyways, like, the idea is that maybe I don't have to load the entire like waveform dump on my little Windows laptop. Now, thankfully, I work for a company that doesn't give me crappy Windows laptops, but I know that a lot of semiconductor companies do, and so like something that runs locally on that laptop and performs reasonably well, so that I'm not having to use like Verdi in a VNC. But VS Code also has the extension ecosystem, so I could hopefully maybe tie into other VS Code extensions, like the System Verilog language server extension. And lastly, like, VS Code is reasonably well designed and reasonably nice to use. I think it's nice to use. It looks way nicer than Eclipse and Verdi and, you know, all those other pieces of software that they make you use at big semiconductor companies. So, so when I made Vaporview, now I'm a fan of opinionated design, and so I had some opinions on it, and like, you know, as they say, make the convention over configuration, and make the easy things easy and the hard things possible. So so yeah, it has to work. That's like #1 top priority. I should have numbered these bullet points, but I'm pretty sure you guys can count to 5. It has to follow VScode design language, so I wanted it to look like it was something that lived inside of VScode, not some like standalone application that's bolted on, and that is not like a slight at anyone. This is like, these are things that I made before I knew about Surfer and I knew that they existed, which if I had known about Surfer, I may not have spent so much time doing this, but anyways, so I wanted to follow like the VS Code design language. I wanted to feel like something that was a native experience and not, you know, some sort of thing that was shoehorned in there, like Wavetrace VCD. And I wanted it to look nice because, again, like one of my biggest complaints about using Verdi in a VNC is that like the text and like element scaling never looks right. Like if you're using like a high DPI monitor, it just the scaling is not right. And I wanted to feel natural. I probably should have said I wanted to feel like it was part of VS Code. So I wanted to like all the key bindings and stuff like that. I wanted to be very intuitive for what you would expect from the VS Code experience. Now I understand that like this is very tuned to VS Code, but I think VS Code actually has a lot of really good conventions in like the way that, you know, key bindings work, and yeah. So, and then the last thing is I wanted it to be interoperable and extendable. So I'm not trying to create a whole IDE, I'm just trying to create a waveform viewer that lives in an IDE. So like I'm not trying to recreate like Teros HDL, which is an awesome extension, and I've talked to Carlos, he's great. But I'm just trying to create something that can be used by a whole bunch of different other extensions, and not trying to like design someone's environment, as opinionated as I am. Just kind of like a summary of the development. I started in October 2023, started working on it. I released version 1.0 in June of 2024, and version 1.0, like looking back, was kind of an embarrassing release because it only supported VCD files. The parser was written in TypeScript, and it was something that I wrote. So like, I mean, it worked. The file size was limited to 2 gigabytes due to the way that VS Code implemented the FS read, and like all number formats were global. So in other words, like if you're viewing like a multi-bit signal and you have a bunch of them in your viewer, like they're all the same format throughout for the whole viewer. So it was like it was very like proof of concept, but I've since made some updates to it. So in version 1.2, I migrated to the Wellen library, and so if any of you guys know Andrew Nolte, he got me in contact with Kevin Laufer, and he wrote the Wellen library, and it's a Rust library for kind of normalizing access to VCD, FST, and GHW waveform dump files, and it's also the library that Surfer uses. So so that's pretty cool. And since Rust can be compiled to WebAssembly, and I can use it in Vaporview and make it cross-platform. So in other words, there's no like weird parser that you have to use for Linux, Mac, and Windows. It just runs on WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is great. As fast as JavaScript is, like JavaScript actually is really fast. It's not memory efficient. It's like the analogy of like the turtles all the way down, except it's pointers. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, so just the memory efficiency for using WebAssembly is really nice, and it's also very fast. So that fixed the 2 gigabyte limit for file sizes, and it also supported more file types, namely FST, which is an okay file format for waveform dumps. It's definitely better than VCD, but it doesn't scale for super large waveform dumps, which that's a little bit out of the scope of this presentation. And then just recently, like a couple months ago, I migrated the renderer from SVG rendering to Canvas. And so originally I All the waveforms I would draw as SVGs, and then I would draw chunks that you'd swap in and out. And I thought, okay, cool, that's going to work really well. And then, then that way I can let the Chromium render do all the heavy lifting when I scroll, and that should make it a nice smooth experience. But that was just again, bad decision on my part. Turns out DOM insertions and parsing are pretty heavy operations. So so I switched over to Canvas. And also the DOM just doesn't like having a bunch of objects. And with SVGs, that creates a whole bunch of like HTML objects that make it really hard for the DOM to process. Canvas was a lot faster than I thought it was. I was afraid that having to render the waveforms like every little chunk of the scroll, that it would be really heavy, but turns out that like frame render times are really, really fast. And I thought, oh, I'd have to port this to WebAssembly, kind of like how Surfer did. But it turns out that the renderer, like just the plain JavaScript version of the renderer, is fast enough. So I just find that kind of ironic. I thought the renderer would need to be sped up with WebAssembly, and it's it's the file parsing that I use WebAssembly for. Yeah, so actually, okay, before I go to this, let's talk about, let's show a demo of this. So this is Vaporview, runs in VScode, and so with Canvas, one of the nice things that I can do is I can just have really smooth scaling of like smooth zooming, and on a touchpad, this is like distractingly satisfying. I don't know if you guys know. And one of the things that I was really opinionated about that I just want to like show off is look at on kind of like the left side, the way that the numbers kind of like, notice how anything that's numerical is left justified, and the hex values are right justified, they center. Like this is one of those things that Verdi has that I thought would look really cool if it was running at like 60 frames a second and not like 4. Anyways, I just wanted to show that off, show off how satisfying the zooming is. The other thing is like, I want IDE type like features. I want this a lot of integration. So one of the things that I have is terminal links. I just have this terminal links.txt just so that I can have the text. That's why I've catted it to the console. But like, actually, let's remove some of these because I didn't realize that I wouldn't have as much vertical space here. So you click on something, command click, adds it to the viewer. But if it's like, if what you're clicking on is not actually a signal and it's like a scope item or like a module, it shows it in the netlist. So I wanted that kind of integration feature. So and I realized that there's the irony of using a text editor like VScode to view stuff like in a console, because typically if you've ever worked on large designs, the UVM logs are just ginormous, so you're not opening them in VScode because it's not going to do all the text syntax like analysis or anything like that. So you're probably going to be using something like Vim or Emacs to go and view your logs. So I made them terminal links. The other thing is like timestamps. So you can use timestamps with units. Notice that this is in picoseconds, but this is 1.1 milliseconds, and it places a marker there. It also works with UVM style timestamps, so you can click on that, and it places a marker. So yeah, I wanted that integrated development experience, and so that's the other really cool thing that I added was signal value links. Now this is like a feature that I mean the feature works, but the implementation that I did, this is a total hack. I just want to like clarify that, but like the idea is that like you can click on these values as links, and I just set it up for this value, and it just produces a dummy command where it outputs the data that it emits. But the idea is that like if you have another extension, you can interoperate with it, and you can maybe tie like an object dump with a program counter value, and then it goes to that place in the code so you can view design behavior and source code. So yeah, that's some stuff that I'm working on. I am almost out of time, so let me finish with the presentation. So I need to future work, so I need to finalize this API. I have some API docs. If you are a VS Code developer, please talk to me. Or like if you have any ideas, feel free to reach out, email me, or talk to me here about what you'd like to see in the API. For version 1.4, I'm going to finalize it. I also want to do signal groups and transactions. I want to have waveform analysis language and waveform control protocol support. And this is kind of like what I intend to support with the API. So terminal, like adding and removing signals, placing markers, querying waveform data. Yeah. So sorry, I got to rush through this. And there's QR codes for my LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me, and the GitHub. Any questions?
Nice one. This looks really cool. Had you been to earlier latch ups or ORCOMs, you probably would have known Surfer was around, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll let you off this time.
No, and just a point to that is like, I really like what the Surfer team is doing, and I am in contact with them, and we are trying to like collaborate in ways that make sense, and sharing libraries, because and it's also nice to know that if I decide that I want to go and be a peanut farmer or something like that, that this kind of work will continue.
Yes, I think it will. All right, great. Yeah, Ethan.
Yeah, very cool. I was playing around with it yesterday, and yeah, very, very satisfying to scroll around.
Yeah.
Do you have so I know Surfer will allow you to like decode, like include like custom decode logic, like if you want to decode like RISC-V instructions and things. Do you is that like on your timeline as well, to like include? Because Surfer has like a cool I think plugin system that they've already made.
Yeah, I want to talk to them to make sure that that there's some level of compatibility for that. So I actually owe Franz a proposal for formalizing a file format so that config files will be shared. Because I know people have their preferences and what they like to use, and so I want to make sure that there's some level of normalized experience across. They tried to be compatible with GTK Wave, and he's like, yeah, that was just too much.
Sure. And also, like, if you, like in Verdi or other, like, IDEs, sometimes it'll allow you to, like, if you click on a net, it will show you where that net exists in the code. I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
No,
that'd be very cool. There's no open source thing, I think, for that yet.
Yeah, no, that's part of like the API. So when you like right click on something, if you look in the API docs, you'll see like when you right click on certain things, here's the stuff that it emits. If you know the VS Code environment, the way that they handle right click menus is a little strange, but like when you right click, it creates some sort of event, and then it emits a bunch of values, and so then you have like these when clause statements to determine whether or not the right-click menu actually appears, and then what command it executes, and then it executes that command with all the data that it emits. And so I have that for signals that are in the viewer, and that way you can do like someone else. And I intentionally did not include this in Vaporview. The idea is that anyone else who has their System Verilog extension, or if they have an extension for some other HDL that's not System Verilog, they can implement that, and all they need to do is just add in that right-click menu and then, show an RTL.
Sure. Thanks. I know now what I'll do before I go to bed. Just look at some waveforms and scroll through them. But in a more kind of, it's probably not a question, but you were talking about large log files, and what I typically encounter is gzipped log files that then I tend to open with kind of less or something like that because they can handle gzipped files kind of right out of the box. Have you seen a kind of a VS Code extension that does that decompression on the fly and just shows them you as a normal file? Or is somebody else here in the room?
Sorry, for the log files?
Gzipped files, yeah, kind of the... No, not for the waveforms, just for log files.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that.
Because there are a couple extensions that kind of first decompress the whole thing and then try to open it to you. That's annoying, but kind of just like Less or Vim does, decompress them on the fly, just show them as a regular file.
Oh, that's cool. So one of the problems with VS Code and the way that
No answer.
it does things is like if there's too many lines, it just turns off all the syntax highlighting. And so then that kind of like, then I can't do the links. Actually, I haven't really tried. I don't know if the links are preserved. I haven't looked into that, but maybe I should.
Or somebody else. I mean, it doesn't need to be all you.
I like that. I like that idea.
Speaking of somebody else, have you had many other contributors to the project, or is this sort of the first announcement of it?
So this is sort of the first announcement of it. I did like post about it on LinkedIn, but yeah. So I do have this other contributor. Ironically enough, this person works for Synopsys, and they created some sort of add-on to allow you to view FSDB files. And I told them, please don't get in trouble. But we're going to be, I think one of the things that, that we'd like to do in the future with that is actually make it compatible with a surf ver. And so make Vaporview compatible with it. But also, then that way, if he can write it for surf ver, then Surfer can also have FSDB support.
Yeah, that would be good actually for Synopsys to just punt some sort of FSDB decoder out into the public domain.
Yeah, apparently there's some political stuff between Novus and, like legacy Novus and Synopsys that has prevented them from doing that.
Yeah. So please come back in the future and tell us all about how it's going. Thank you very much, Lloyd. See you soon.
Thank you.